Hello everyone, today I'm going to speak about immature consciousness. Spiritually immature consciousness is that of a toddler, of a child. And so when we face this consciousness, we wonder about the level of awareness. Well, immature consciousness has very limited level of awareness, or in other words, it lacks high intelligence, spiritual intelligence. It cannot discern. That's why it follows. Immature consciousness is that of a toddler, because a toddler cannot discern in life. Immature consciousness, spiritually immature consciousness, cannot discern. That's why it follows, because it is an extension. It wants to belong. It wants to belong to a certain paradigm. It has no reference point. That's why it has to look for validation outside of itself. It has not grown up to be a parent for itself. That's why it looks up to parents. That's why it looks for someone to look up to. Immature consciousness in an adult body is a sign of mostly spiritual insanity or delusion. Narcissism is none other but the immature consciousness in a body of an adult that neither knows own boundaries nor respects the boundaries of other. Spiritually immature beings have to belong. They lack the sense of inner being, wholesomeness. That's why they need to belong. Once I observed a child who was traveling with the parents from a sport game or some football match, and they continuously yelled and yelled and yelled something that resembled, I don't know, maybe a team trying to cheer up a team. And it was annoying to everyone else around, and yet they couldn't stop the child. This is an example of spiritually immature consciousness. It repeats like a parrot. It doesn't perhaps even know or realize what it repeats continuously. It doesn't realize what it says, but it says it because it makes it feel like it belongs. It wants to be a part of something, which makes it feel like it's complete, and yet it remains as an extension. This situation reminded me of the majority of our people in this day and age. We want to belong. We want to accept everything that we are told for the truth. Immature consciousness cannot question. It simply doesn't question. It doesn't discern. It hasn't developed that higher connection with the higher awareness of reality so that it can create healthy boundaries within oneself and with the reality. So it is constantly, or it lives constantly with this perception of being an extension. It looks for a shepherd, for a parent to follow someone. Spiritually immature consciousness has not gained autonomy. That's why it's very similar to, psychologically speaking, narcissism. It rebels against authority perhaps sometimes, but doesn't want to be autonomous because its survival depends on the reflection, on the validation from the outside. the spiritually mature consciousness is autonomous because it perceives wholesomeness from within. That's why it feels autonomous and at the same time complete and independent somewhat in perception from the external projection. Those who refine themselves notice that they somewhat become overly independent, but in fact, they're just disconnecting from the immature cluster of consciousness within our collective and becoming a part of the minority or of that collective cluster, which is of a different frequency, of a higher frequency. And that's why it feels as if you are disconnecting, you're growing in your individuality, but in fact, you're growing in your autonomy, because none of us can be really separate or individual. We always are a part of something. But as an individual consciousness, you definitely mature and create specific boundaries. These boundaries are the frequency boundaries rather than other type of boundaries. They are not selfishness, rather they are the boundaries of the frequency. And so you feel sometimes as if isolated or not understood because your frequency is different. For a higher frequency, spiritually immature consciousness seems to be the consciousness of a madman. A consciousness that creates and attaches to its creation, that deludes itself through its creation, yet is unconscious of the creative process. Spiritually immature consciousness brings itself into trouble, into misalignment, or propels misalignment, propels imbalance in life, and yet fails to feel accountable, to feel responsible. Spiritually immature consciousness is irresponsible and victimized. Spiritually mature consciousness believes in illusion, assumes something, accepts something for belief without being able to check it from within. Whatever is told, it accepts. Whatever narrative is taught, it accepts without questioning, without learning. So there is no learning there. Spiritually immature consciousness cannot simply learn. It just accepts the predigested knowledge. And then it propagates it. It preaches it. It becomes righteous and even violent just to prove a point. Spiritually mature consciousness cannot come closer to the possibility to evolve because it hasn't simply grown up. And such consciousness drags its body into a spiritual pit. It drains its essence. It gives it to the projected reality. That's why its body ages, decays, and eventually has to be abandoned for not being fit to continue. Yet the one who is pushed out of the body, or is so-called rotting alive and dying in agony is still a toddler. Hundreds of incarnations may pass, but if the person is a toddler and cannot evolve, their perception remains the same, whether they're in a child body or in the body of an adult. The majority of people in this day and age are like that of a toddler, like that of a spiritual narcissist or a delusional person, a madman who lives through their imagination unconsciously without developing their high spiritual intellect. They have no connection with the higher awareness being. And therefore, they are forever restless, anxiously gliding along the surface, dearly holding onto delusional paradigms and yet feeling righteous and defensive over that. Such people are not fit for spiritual knowledge nor spiritual evolution. They perish both spiritually and physically eventually. Thank you very much, and wishing you all discernment.